Well, good morning, everyone. This is our City of Bloomington Housing and Neighborhood Development Tenant Resource Fair. We're glad to have a number of groups with us this morning. We are giving presentations now that are being recorded on CATs, and for any participants, we are here in the City Council chamber at City Hall as the farmers market goes on outside. There may or may not be some rain coming, so I'm sure we'll have folks come in from outside as they are able. But my name is John Zodi. I'm the Director of Housing and Neighborhood Development here in Bloomington, and we are having this resource fair this morning for those who are renting in Bloomington, those who are thinking about it, or those who may know people who are renting or may have trouble renting. Bloomington is a two-thirds rental community, and as a college town, we have a lot of interest in making sure that our housing is safe and that our housing stock is of quality. And so it's really important that the department and the city government as a whole do as much outreach as we can on making sure that people know what that information is, what they need to know as a renter, what they may need to know as a property owner or a manager. And so we like to have all those folks work together as much as possible. And I do want to thank those public officials who have joined us, State Representative Matt Pierce, State Senator Shelley Yoder, the Perry and Bloomington Township Trustees Office are with us, in addition to many different organizations across the city and from around the state that you'll hear from this morning. I'm going to be sort of the MC today as we hear presentations, and again, these are being recorded for those who aren't able to join us this morning or who may be able to watch now or later on CATS. And so I want to give a quick update about what the Housing and Neighborhood Development Department does here at the city, and then I'm going to turn it over to a couple of our staff members who will tell you a little bit more. So the Housing and Neighborhood Development Department sort of has two functions. One big function is the rental inspection program. As many people know, we are governed by local laws and ordinances, and Title 16 of our city municipal code is our rental inspection program. So if you rent a property in Bloomington, within the city of Bloomington, there are about 28,000 rental units. And so if you live in one of those, it should be registered with our department. And we have a group of neighborhood compliance officers on our staff who inspect those properties on a 3, 4, or 5-year basis. They will also inspect them more frequently if there's an issue that comes up in the unit. So if you feel that something isn't right, if you're a tenant and you feel something isn't quite right with your unit, or maybe there's a communication issue with getting a problem fixed, you can call our office and we can send somebody out and work with the tenants and hopefully the property manager and the landlord to fix that problem, especially if it's an emergent problem. So if we're in winter and your furnace or your heater is broken, if you have chronic health problems and maybe your air conditioner isn't working, if there's a safety issue that you see, we can come and check that out. And so we encourage people to call our office. And we do as much as we can to collaborate with landlords and property managers. And we appreciate their help in disseminating information on this. We have a good partnership with the Monroe County Apartment Association and work through them to disseminate information to our property owners and managers around the city, as well as our tenants. So and that again is one of the missions of today, is to get more information out there to those who need it, whatever your interest is in the rental business or the rental residency program. So that program, the rental inspection program, is where we use our ability to get information out there, what are rights and responsibilities of a tenant. We encourage that information to be pushed out. We want to make sure that we know when a tenant moves in or moves out what's there. If there are any damages, we sort of work with the property owners and the landlords as much as possible to have that information out there as well. Our compliance staff also helps enforce, regulate, hate to use the word enforce, but we help manage for the city what's called Title VI, and that is our neighborhood compliance program. So if you're in Bloomington and you own a property, we're at that time of year, the hardest time of the year to keep your grass cut, but it has to be 8 inches or lower. within the city of Bloomington. And so we know it's my grass. Thought this morning before I left, I wish I would have gotten it mowed last night, but I just didn't have time. But we encourage people to keep their grass in their yards looking as they should, below 8 inches. Also keep trash and things picked up, so our compliance staff are out in neighborhoods making sure that that we help our city stay beautiful and clean. And so that is one major function of the hand department. And then we have neighborhood services. Our neighborhood services program helped put together today's event. Angela Van Roy is our program manager and helped coordinate this event. She also works with our neighborhood associations. Bloomington has about 50 neighborhood organizations. And depending on the neighborhood you live in, those may be formally organized, they may be a little more organic, but we have a lot of active neighborhoods in Bloomington, and so we coordinate neighborhood cleanups. We have grant programs that help our neighborhoods and do a lot of things to make sure the fabric of Bloomington is illustrated through all the residents of our neighborhoods as well. We are the historic preservation department for the city of Bloomington, and so we have a very active historic preservation community here in Bloomington, and the Historic Preservation Commission is staffed by our department. And so if you own or live in a historic property in Bloomington, it is subject to certain guidelines and scrutiny by the Historic Preservation Commission. It can be, I should say, it's not always, but we encourage folks, if you live in a historic property, you have a question about the history of your property or the history of your neighborhood, that you contact us as well, and we can tell you about that and make sure that you have all the information you need to understand what needs to be done. So we've got a great diverse historic preservation effort here in Bloomington, and we really count that as helping advance the quality of life here in Bloomington to save our history. The one big thing we do is manage money from the U.S. Housing and Urban Development Department. So community development block grants, home investment partnership programs, those funds go through the city of Bloomington and are awarded to organizations across the community who are doing various types of activity, childcare, housing, food service, food provision, all kinds of different things that are nonprofit. We have a really robust nonprofit network here in Bloomington, and so they work hard to provide services to folks here in Bloomington, and so our department works with them to help fund a lot of those programs. And so we have some program managers that help administer those funds as well. So HAND is a very robust department in our functions. We have several different things we do. We're out in the community a lot. A lot of people know us, and our job is to work for the citizens and the residents of Bloomington, and so we want to make sure that we get our resources out there, whether it's rental inspection programs, whether it's tenant resources, all the partners we have in the community that help advance the cause of neighborhood development and housing here in Bloomington. We want to make sure that we sort of get that partnership well known in the community and that we're accessible, because people have a lot of questions. If you're living in a house, whether you own it or you rent it, you need to know that it can be the very best place to live. And if it's a rental property, then we have a hand in helping you do that. And so we want to make sure that we are, as I said at the beginning, keeping our housing stock safe and that it's quality. And so with that, I'm going to bring up a couple of our staff members. So Cody Toothman is our program manager for Community Development Block Grant Social Services. He also is in charge of our housing counseling program. So if you have some needs if you would like to move down the path of buying a house, if you're a renter, Cody can help you through that. We have different programs that he'll talk about here that we do throughout the year, and I want to bring up Cody here. So Cody, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, John. I'm going to say here this morning, I am here to talk about our Renters 101 program. So this program essentially is an, opening of the door sorts to being able to receive deposit assistance of up to $500. Through this program, we are seeking to actually, educate people who might be new to renting or have rented before and the overall basics. So and over the course of this class, we go over financial management, understanding the basics of credit, Fair housing, of course, looking for an apartment that suits you. Cost of renting, utilities, moving costs, pet deposits, that additional amount that they add for having a pet. The different types of leases, although a lot of leases in Bloomington tend to run 12 months as opposed to month or even in quarters as some do. Let's see. Deposits and fees, of course, application processing and the results, what kind of things the landlord will check when going over your application. Of course, how to deal with consumer reporting agencies if there is a mark on your credit that might be preventing you from having those applications be approved, what measures you can take to help clear those up. And then, of course, why people are denied. So this course, we're trying to do a group offering, although it can be offered on an individual basis as well, depending on need. I know if you're getting ready to sign a lease and that move-in date's coming up, you probably want to do so sooner as opposed to later, so that way we can get that money out to them, or at least help you understand your rights as a renter before you move in a little better. But that course offering will be next month for a group basis, which we have intake forms out in the lobby for. It's going to be June 18th, I believe. And we'll, of course, hopefully have a lot of sign-ups for that. That course will be good for 2 years. So if you find yourself moving or getting into a new place anytime within that time, you can reach out to us for the initial or for the application for deposit assistance. We'll be happy to assist you in getting everything covered from there. Of course, as John mentioned, we also have other programs at the city. So this counseling that we offer with Renters 101 is also good at any time, even after you move in. So if you rent, own, whatever it may be, we can assist with any kind of credit counseling, or I saw the cameras go out for a second, pre-purchase, foreclosure prevention, counseling, whatever it may be. We also offer up home repair grants, such as our emergency home repair or owner-occupied rehabilitation grants, including a home modification for accessible living, which is designed to help homes become more ADA accessible. So keep us in mind for all those. I know I could, part of our program will also cover, for Renters 101, going back to that, part of our program will also cover what our next presenter actually does, which is our rental inspection program. I know I've just about run out of things to say here, so I can bring up our rental inspector, Joe Stong. Joe, come on up.
Technical stuff. Here we go. I'm Joe Stong. I'm one of the inspectors for hand. As John talked about, John Zodi, we have inspection program. It's not a complete anomaly. Other communities have one, different parts. I think Madison, Wisconsin has one. A lot of college towns have an inspection program where rental properties are inspected on a cyclical basis. Here in Bloomington, it's called the Big Mouthful Residential Rental Unit and Lodging Establishment Inspection Program. So if you have if you own property in Bloomington and you rent it, you have to have it inspected. You have to register the property and have it inspected by somebody at hand. You then get a rental occupancy permit that is good for 3, 4, or 5 years, depending on the situation. So kind of a short history of the code. I don't want to bore you too much, but there's a picture of the original code, which was signed December 31st, 1972. It was called the Tenant Landlord Ordinance, and it was started largely one guy, Al Towell, who was a city council member, sort of pushed for it in response to, in the 60s, a lot of campuses, a lot of college campuses, everybody had to live on campus. It was a requirement. And in the 60s, that started changing, and people were revolting, and they wanted to live off campus. Well, here in Bloomington, there was a lot of really old housing stock. And if you don't have, this is a maintenance code, if you don't have that, if you build a building or a house, it never gets looked at again unless there's a fire or they pull a building permit and make some sort of improvements to the house. So in response to that, they wanted to have this landlord-tenant ordinance, which has grown to be what it is today. They didn't charge anything for inspections until '93, and at that time, because they were starting to charge, they added a 5-year cycle permit to incentivize landlords to come and participate. They still said everybody had to be registered. And people started registering, and then there was a huge backlog in like 1973. As soon as this program started, it got backlogged terribly. They figured it out by 1977 and had a few inspectors. Anyway, so they started charging in 93, and then in about 2012, we rewrote the code, and at that time, we included lodging establishments so we can inspect hotels and motels on a complaint basis. We've done quite a bit of that. It's much less active, that part of it, than the residential rental part. So that's sort of how it went, the history of it. Now this isn't going. Can you click me? No? Did I turn it off? There you go. Oh, thank you. So our code is a minimal maintenance code. It's to provide assurance of minimum safety and habitability. I'll try not to just read all this, but it's not going to make everything perfect and pretty. But we make sure, some of the stuff we do is make sure emergency exits and smoke detectors work. We check all the systems of the house. We make sure there's no plumbing leaks, that sort of thing, no big structural issues. Roof is in a good shape. If it's a gas furnace, we require a carbon monoxide test to make sure it's not emitting dangerous amounts of carbon monoxide. You don't have to do it every year, but when we only see a property every 3 to 5 years, we do a pretty severe check on that sort of thing. We want to stress that ugly is not a violation. So if you're an owner and you got chipping paint on the outside of your house, if you put primer on it, that's cool. It doesn't have to match. We don't care. That may not look the best, and there may be complaints about it, but there's nothing we can do about that in the code. The idea of chipping paint is to prevent lead-based paint from flaking off. If the house was built before 1973, you probably have lead-based paint in it. And as long as it is encapsulated, meaning painted over, sided over, it's not chipping, it's okay. So that primer is going to do the job. You don't want to have bare wood exposed because that'll attract bugs. And so anyway, ugly's not a violation. You can have stuff in your front yard as long as it's stuff that's supposed to be outside. You can't have furniture outside, but you can, indoor furniture you can't have outside. But you can have garden tools and things of that nature. And it may not be neatly stacked like you might do at your house, but you can have it. One thing we don't address, and we get so many calls about, is mold. We don't have anything in our code about mold. If we see it, we tell the people to remove it, either the landlord or the tenant. And we look for sources of mold, like we'll check the gutters and make sure they're not pouring against the house. We'll make sure there's no leaks in the house. We'll check that sort of thing, but we don't have anything specifically at mold. We don't do testing for it. There are entities that do. There's people at the state that can come down periodically and do checks for mold, and we can work with them and help address it. But specifically a mold complaint, it's sad. We can't do too much about it. Click me, please, Kelly. So how many rentals? John already talked about it. There's about 28,000. The number's sort of fluid. It shouldn't be. Of course, it isn't fluid, but some of these we've not been in yet, and they've registered, but we haven't done an inspection. About 4,200 of those are single-family units, one building and one unit in that, so just a house. And we have about 5,800 files. There's a file like this on every single property, and there's a contact sheet I'll talk about later, but we encourage everybody to come in and look at the file before they sign a lease. We have 6 inspectors and a program manager, and we do about that many cycle inspections per year, about 250 per inspector. So that said, an inspection could be 1 unit, an inspection can be 3 of us going out to do 400 units over a 3-day period. So that's kind of how that goes. Go ahead. So yes, please come in and look at the file before you sign something. It gives you a pretty good overview of the general maintenance and upkeep of the property. On this side is all the inspections we've done. There's a permit in here. You should have a permit hanging in your property somewhere. It tells you how many people are allowed to live there, when the property was last inspected. You can see any complaints there have been. These are all the contact notes for us. So there's a floor plan in here usually that we've done, so it's not super accurate, but it's an idea about how it is and how much square footage there is in the house. So it's a pretty valuable resource that I hope more people can use. Go ahead. So if you have issues with your rental property, if you have a spoon for a doorknob, for example, this is stuff that we have seen having a code. So without a code, and these are not old pictures, these are 5 years old maybe. For example, the door going to nowhere that somebody could fall out of. Go ahead. So this is when we go off cycle. The cycle inspections are every 3 to 5 years. If you have a complaint, we always ask that you give the landlord an opportunity to fix it, typically 2 weeks. If there's no response, you can call us. We'll set up an inspection with you, the tenant, and you have to be there. We have to notify the landlord. They can be there or not. Sometimes they're there. Sometimes there's a big fight. Sometimes nobody shows up except for the tenant. If it's a valid complaint, we write a report and then we mail it to the owner, and they have 2 weeks typically to fix it. Things like no heat, no water, no air conditioning, those are more life safety issues, and those have like a 24-hour turnaround typically. So that's how that works, and you can always call us if there's a problem with your unit. We don't go into the tenant, the issues between the contractual things between the tenant and the landlord. Like if you're not getting your deposit back, we refer you to a legal service organization. We don't help with that. We help the property itself. So if there's issues with your own property, that's what we do. So that's rental complaints. These are some of the complaints we got. Those are a couple of raccoons in a vent. The tenant actually took that picture and sent it to me, but I did put my head in that vent and go, "What are you guys doing?" And I heard them going, "Wee, wee, wee, wee." They were all in there. They were in the vents. They were in the bulkheads. You could hear them running around. So that's a lot of, that's some of the stuff we get. Appliances not working, electrical troubles. Also, the tenant or the landlord can complain about the tenant. If there are housekeeping issues, if there are bugs, if there are things like that, if they are tearing the place down, the landlord can complain about that, about you, and so we would set that up with the landlord. Yeah, go ahead. And this is some stuff you may not have considered if you're just starting to rent and you're having responsibilities. In Bloomington, you are responsible for having the snow removed from the sidewalks, snow and ice. Now, it may be in your lease that the landlord does it, or it may be in the lease that you do it, and we don't care about who does it, but you'll get tickets if you don't do that. Putting your trash out regularly, not letting it accumulate like that guy, and also cutting the grass. Do we go out and measure everybody's grass? No. But if it looks long like this, we'll probably issue a warning, and if it's not cut within a few days, we'll issue tickets and fine them until it does get cut. It is part of living in a neighborhood. It's part of living in the city, to be part of the community. And when you got long grass, you usually have some brush and stuff. And then in the county, you'll probably get bunnies and things. And in the city, you're more likely to get rats and other unpleasant stuff. And then it's everyone's problem. So that's probably why we're here. I think that's it. If anybody has questions, let me know. Yes? A little of both, I think. There are a lot of different kinds of mold. There are really literally hundreds of thousands, and I'm not an expert on it, but I know which ones are harmful and which are not. You know, a lot of times we'll get called out for mold around the windows, you know, especially on a vinyl window. That's really kind of mildew, and it's more of a housekeeping issue. In the bathroom, we get a lot of, and the same thing. It's not necessarily black mold, which is what everyone says. Not everyone. Many people say it's black mold, and it really can be. And if it's we've had a few situations. One person left town, and I think they left their air conditioning running the whole time, and it was black mold, 3 feet high, all over the apartment. So that was a bad situation. What we told them to do, it wasn't a test for mold, but remove the drywall, replace it, get rid of any traces of mold, and treat it with kills. So we do address it in that regard. But there's so many different kinds, and we don't test for it, that it's difficult to know we don't know what's the most dangerous kind and what's not. It isn't always obvious. In a bathroom, it's usually mildew from not running the fan or not having enough ventilation. So that's kind of it. I don't know that the city council ignored it, and I don't know that we did. It was not part of, the previous code was the International Property Maintenance Code, and it's not really addressed in that either, except to say be free of mold. Surfaces should be free of mold.
Another question I wondered about was for single-family rentals at home. Have you seen an uptick in these hedge funds and out-of-state investors buying homes here in Bloomington, or who typically owns a single-family house that's being rented?
I honestly don't know the answer to that. We don't always pay attention to the, if you live out of state, you have to have an in-state agent. I guess I have noticed a little uptick in it. It's more, it seems to me within, or at least around the county or around the campus, seems to be more locally owned folks. I haven't seen a huge buy-up. The bigger complexes that are going up, those are almost, a lot of them exclusively out-of-state owners. But I think most of the single-family homes are locally owned by local landlords. Anybody else?
I have a question. So those files right there that we can come in and see, are those available online anywhere, or do you need to come in to see them?
Not yet. We're sort of in the process of doing, of digitizing all our files, but nothing's available yet. They're getting scanned in and stuff, and eventually, yes, we've been pretty 20th century about it for a long time. But you can come in any time and look at it. At this time, City Hall's still mostly closed, but we can meet you up here. You can give us the address, we can come back. And sometimes you can come into the office and we can set you in a room, and you're still away from people for COVIDian things, but you can always come in and look at it. Anybody else? All right, thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Some of those questions, if you weren't able to hear at home, was a question about mold, which I think Joe answered and understand what the question was. But the next question was about how many single-family homes do we have? Have we seen an uptick in those being owned or bought by sort of out-of-town or out-of-state folks? And the vast majority of single-family rentals in Bloomington are owned by folks in Bloomington or Monroe County. The next question was about our files that Joe held up, and whether those are viewable online. We are in the process of digitizing our files, as Joe said, but those are available to be viewed by the public. We can meet you up front in City Hall, as Joe mentioned, so I just wanted to make sure those at home knew what the questions were that were asked. Next up, we're going to talk about eviction avoidance. Since the onset of the pandemic, there was a lot of discussion about evictions and eviction prevention, and There were eviction moratoriums put in place, but those have since expired. And somebody that's been at the red-hot center of that is Tonda Radawan here in Monroe County with the HEP program, the Housing Eviction and Protection Program. And so want to bring her up and talk a little bit about this and continue on with our program. So Tonda, turn it over to you.
Thanks, everyone. I'll move this microphone once I get my notes here set up. First of all, I want to thank the city for hosting this event. It's something that we were hoping that could happen and was in the planning for over a year. Obviously, with pandemic-related concerns and lots of groups meeting together in person, it wasn't something that was best at that time, but definitely something that's necessary. John mentioned that our program has had several different name changes. Any of you that have been a collaboration know that that sometimes things can change depending on who your partners are and where your funding comes from. Now we're the Housing and Eviction Prevention Project. We're a collaboration not only with the judges that preside over the small claims eviction cases here in Monroe County. We also provide legal services through Justice Unlocked. We have an attorney that works with the project through them. And also an attorney through District 10 Pro Bono Project, now Pro Bono Indiana. Our other collaborators are CJAM, Community Justice and Mediation Center. Liz Granat from CJAM will be speaking later on in the program. And then myself, what my role is, or at least I see that role, is kind of being a liaison between landlords and tenants that have questions or wanting services, wanting some navigation on how that court process works with evictions. I also talk to a lot of the people that are here that provide direct services to clients, township trustees' offices, nonprofits, to just try to bring everybody together to provide as much information and service that we can to keep people from becoming homeless. A little bit of background on how we started. We began in June 2019. It was a pilot project through SIHO, South Central Indiana Housing Organization, through some funding through Prosperity Indiana. We also had some funding at that time through the city of Bloomington, Jack Hopkins. And so it was a two-part programming where SIHO housing navigators would go to various places in the community. I'd set up at the library, I'd set up at Mother Hubbard's cupboard, sometimes at a trustee's office, really anybody that would have us. We would set up and have information and really just be there to talk one-on-one with anyone that had a housing question or a housing issue. We wanted to become visible, we wanted to be out in the community and find out what the challenges were. At that time, I kind of looked over some of the data from that time frame. The biggest challenge was finding housing that was affordable. And then under that umbrella, I guess, it was people that qualified for and had a Section 8 housing voucher, being able to find a landlord that would take that voucher. And then third was landlord-tenant issues, mostly habitability, and then just wanting to know legal rights. So that was in mid to late 2019. We were also able to set up a desk in the Monroe County Courthouse, and so that kind of segues into what we're doing now with HEP. We would be and I'm not sure, hopefully not many of you are very familiar with the court system here, depending on what you do, but in the Justice Building, they allowed us to have a table set up. So you'd walk into court for your eviction hearing. Usually at that time, they were all held at the same time, maybe 12 to 20 people would just show up at 1 o'clock on a Tuesday for their eviction hearing. And as you were walking through that lobby, you would see our table there, and you could get quick legal advice from an attorney before you went in. And after you had that advice, if the other side was willing, you could meet with mediators from CJAM to try to come up with an agreement before you went in front of the judge. All of this was taking place in an area about half this size in the courthouse. It was pretty hectic. You'd have people making agreements in the stairway, in the lobby outside of the hallway, and I mean, it was very active. It was definitely a program that there are a lot of people that were interested in, and so we functioned in that way twice a week because the courts are set up where there's two different courts and small claims that have the initial eviction and damages hearings, and so we would be there. Sometimes somebody from BHA would be there and sit at the table, or a trustee's office, really anybody that was trying to help tenants and pro se landlords provide those services. So that's kind of what our focus was at that time, and then, you know, of course, the pandemic happened, and so the last time that we were in the courthouse was March 13th, 2020. That was the last date that we were there, and we still were able to provide services. We went telephonic. We then worked with CJAM's landlord-tenant coordinator to create a process where we could still provide those services over the phone, online, and then when court became remote over Zoom, we were able to adapt what we were doing in that situation. And I want to pay attention to time because I know we're talking about several different things here, not just kind of this one area that HEP is helping out. So what we do, I think, and where we're the most effective is in the courtroom or in the court process. So for those of you that aren't aware, in Monroe County, ever since March 13, 2020, initial eviction and damages hearings are now remote over Zoom. You don't go to the courthouse. You can you participate over the phone or computer, hopefully with a camera, and you still get those services. The judges now will update tenants on the Indiana Emergency Rental Assistance Program, the Landlord-Tenant Eviction Diversion Program that is now in place with the state, and then some of the services that we're able to provide locally. A tenant will be offered legal advice. It's triage legal advice. It's not the same as having your own represented attorney. After they have that legal advice, if the parties are interested, they go into a breakout room and they're able to mediate. Oftentimes what that looks like for somebody that might have a Section 8 voucher or a different type of voucher, they are maybe able to enter into a voluntary surrender agreement to keep that housing voucher. When we went into this program thinking of what eviction avoidance looked like, it's a little bit different. I mean, we want people to retain their housing, but as some of the other people before me talked about, you know, housing it's a challenge here, like it is in many communities across. We're not unique in that situation, especially compared to other college towns. But being able to find that alternate housing is somewhat of a challenge. I do want to make sure that I'm talking about something that's really important to me, and I'm so glad that the Indiana Emergency Rental Assistance Program could be here. What we're finding in the hearings is the best remedy, of course, for anybody to not get evicted, outside of, you know, some lease violations, is to be able to pay your rent. Having that opportunity for rental assistance available has definitely helped people stay housed. The challenge has been the timing. Thousands of people are applying and getting approved and being able to pay their landlords and property managers, but the time frame usually is not enough to keep someone from getting evicted. So the more that we're seeing the program be successful, the more our local landlords and property managers are supporting the program and putting that off or resetting a hearing. It's allowing enough time for that money to come in. One thing that I would really also like to focus on, besides just encouraging anybody that would qualify to apply for the emergency rental assistance, is to talk a little bit about eviction expungement. That came up early on, about 3 years ago, is looking at what were the protections here in Indiana. There are different types of expungement programs for criminal and other types of cases, but not for civil evictions. A lot of work went into approaching the state legislation, putting these things into place, and we now have House Bill 1214 that passed unanimously back in March. So what that means is for certain residential evictions, if you're getting evicted by your landlord, if you meet certain qualifications, that would be that it was a non-payment for rent issue, that you were able to come to either an agreement or have the case not be active within a 6-month period, then you have that possibility to have those records closed. People have been working very hard on having something like that approved. We were hoping that eviction diversion programs might have been mandatory through that process. They are still voluntary, but they do exist. I could talk a little bit more about that as well. I do want to make sure that I keep some time for questions, because the things that I'm passionate about and have been spending my time on might not be the same as what other questions are here. So I think with the time available, I want to make sure that I keep that open for questions. So I guess I'm wondering if there are any. And I'm also not a public speaker by trade, so if you'd like for me to go back on some areas, I certainly can, yes.
So Tanya, so one of the things that I think is important for people to understand is the role that HEP plays with helping tenants and pro se lawyers, pro se landlords who need support with understanding how the court system works. And can you talk a little bit about how HEP supports tenants in prepping if they get a hold of you in time?
Sure, and I really appreciate that question, Liz. So yes, earlier on I was talking about the court process. One other thing that we do in my role is with HEP is we have an intake line. And so many people that are calling are referred from your agencies or referred from the hand department, because as Joe mentioned, their jurisdiction has to do with the structure in the building, but if you have a landlord-tenant issue, they might not be able to address it because it's outside of what they can do. They often get referred to our intake line where I can kind of assess the situation and provide that information on what they might expect at an initial hearing, provide them with resources where they hopefully can resolve the issue before that hearing takes place, and really kind of help somebody that's not been through that process be able to advocate for themselves, whether it's providing documentation that they need, helping them understand how Zoom works, accessing their hearing, because a lot of people might not have utilized that technology before, and we certainly don't want them to be in a different level of the playing field because they don't have that access to technology. That I think is a really important role, I guess, that I play in that process, is being a person that someone can call or text that needs help just accessing their hearing. We want everybody to know that they have a hearing taking place. The way that you can advocate for yourself is to know it's happening and to get there. When it comes to the intake line, the last time I did some data tracking, a third of the calls were actually about habitability. And now, of course, the intake line is not only within the city, it's within Monroe County. So people wondering what can they do if they have that black mold, because we have a wonderful program here through HAND, but they can only do what is within their jurisdiction. If you live outside of city limits, what can you do? And so I'm often talking to people and asking them if they are aware of what you can do at Monroe County Health Department. Talk to the health department. I don't know if You've looked at their website lately. There have been so many improvements on additional information that's available on air quality and mold and ways that they're keeping track of complaints that come in so they can hopefully, through their process, update the code and then, create a program to help renters have better habitable places. Liz mentioned pro se landlords. I think there's a lot of people think that we're solely a tenant organization. Many people that own property here in Bloomington don't have property management. Sometimes they're referred as mom and pop landlords. Maybe they're invested in a property as part of their retirement plan, or or they maybe have 2 or 3 properties because they're really trying to create more Section 8 housing. And so a lot of times those people can't afford attorney representation, just like the tenants. The going rate around $175 to $325 is the highest I've seen on some of those attorney affidavits. Often you can't, you might not, that might be out of your budget. And so general questions, we're able to answer things like service of process or what the next step is in a case. That is something that we do. It is getting close. I'm wondering if there are other questions. And again, thank you for that, Liz. Yes, please.
So obviously the trip intake line is part of the answer here, but getting in contact with tenants once the courts went remote, how were you able to proactively, how were you able to make yourself available to these tenants who were no longer walking and seeing your table?
So that's a great question. I probably should explain that more in the court process. So after the tenants that are in their hearings by phone or by Zoom have attorney advice, then they go to mediation, and the hope is that an agreement is made after that. They go in front of the judge, and after whatever the decision is determined, they then get sent to a breakout room where I meet with them. And so we call that a checkout process, and so that is a private breakout room. It runs the range of somebody being really frustrated about what happened, and they can just talk about their frustrations, to finding a little bit more about what the reason for the evicted. Oftentimes in that checkout process, I'm making sure they have information for Indiana Emergency Rental Assistance. If they're mental health or emotional health issues, then I can refer them to the appropriate places in the community. I feel myself getting a little emotional. A lot of what I'm doing is triage because there aren't those services out there, especially when it comes to the people that don't yet have that case management. Part of the reason why we started this checkout process is so somebody would have someone to talk to instead of just finding out they're evicted and they need to be out in 5 days, or they agreed to voluntarily surrender so they could retain their housing voucher and not have an eviction on their record. Ultimately, though, for them, in that moment, it's still the same. They now have to find housing within a short amount of time, and so they at least have a person they can talk to help them get connected to the next place. I will say that's the most emotionally demanding part of what I do. There are up to 24 hearings each day that eviction hearings take place. So those are 3 hearings every 15 minutes, 2 days a week. So that can be, 25, 30 people that you're talking to that are, definitely under some understandable emotional duress. It's now, I think, time to bring up Liz. If anyone has any additional questions, I will be at the table out here. Very accessible on the intake line, and I'm very pleased to stand up here with Liz Granat.
And also, I wanted to add to what Tanda was talking about, to your question about how are we connecting with tenants. And part of what Tanda's role has been over the last couple of years is to do a lot of networking with a lot of organizations throughout the community to tell them about our services. And so when they are talking to a tenant that knows they're in trouble and needs help, one of the things that happens is that tenant hotline that we have, the HEP hotline, folks are calling. Oftentimes, though, unfortunately, as Tanda said, they're calling maybe 2 weeks, before their hearing. But at least then she's able to talk to them about what will happen at the hearing, what they need to be pulling together, the paperwork, what they need to be prepared for. She gives them at that point an opportunity to reach out to an attorney for legal advice if it looks like they need mediation. She offers if mediation could help. We'll then try to get a hold of the tenant really quickly. Oftentimes, though, in that time frame, things have escalated and to such a degree that folks really are sort of in crisis mode, and it's very difficult for problem solving to happen. And so then oftentimes they end up in court, but then that's great because she has their contact information. Another thing that Tanda has been doing too is doing text reminders, and you get that information from the court docket. So Tanda goes into some, I don't know, don't ask me, it's Doc Pops or something like that, and looks at the schedule, and if there is a contact information for a tenant, she either emails or texts them to say, hey, your hearing is tomorrow at 10 a.m., don't forget. So that's been a really important part, I think, for this process. And I'm Liz Granette with Community Justice and Mediation Center, and we're partners on this project. And I want to kind of start with telling you in general about community mediation and our services, because we do a lot more than landlord-tenant, and then focus just a little bit on our processes. So, really conflict happens everywhere, every day. Everybody suffers that. And for over 30 years, CJAM has been in this community providing services for folks in conflict to help them figure out a way forward. All of our programs are delivered by community mediators who are trained, people just like you. We have a training coming up in the fall, and we are really anxious to get more community people involved in our organization, learning how to be a mediator, restorative justice facilitator. And then we do training, conflict resolution, training and education, mediation training, and then group facilitation. So when groups of folks can't figure out how to get along, or there's an issue where there's really intense divisiveness, CJAM kind of brings folks together in a safe space to help them figure out whether or not they can find a way forward. And so we find that when people have an option, especially court-related things, where people have an option to decide together what an agreement might be, people often live up to that agreement because they feel they've been heard and that they've figured out a way forward. Our mediators are not legal, we don't give legal advice, and we don't tell people what to do. We really just have a process to help folks figure it out. For landlord, so let me give you some examples of, we have a lot of neighbor disputes where somebody's dog is, going in their yard and having fun in their yard, or a tree limb is falling over and creating damage. We do roommate mediations. We help families when they're trying to figure out what to do with their aging parents. We call it elder mediation, and sort of help people figure out next steps, family members who might have really emotional different ways of wanting to help their parent age gracefully. We work with a lot of community organizations, businesses, so if you're a supervisor and you've got 2 employees and they are just stuck and you have tried different strategies, you can call CJAM, and we can help those 2 people see if they can find a way forward. Our services are very confidential, and agreements, so at the end of each mediation, well, let me tell you how it works. So if you have, how many of you are here because you're work in an organization, or you're here because you're a tenant? both or, so let me talk a little, so one of the things that we want to do in CJAM is really try to raise the awareness of our services here, because we know that if we can intervene earlier in the conflict process, we'll have more opportunity to help folks, because the more people get entrenched with their position, or for tenants who start getting really behind in rent, it becomes so much more difficult to figure out a way forward. So we really want to get the word out and get people coming to us earlier. And what happens, it's really easy. You just call us if you have a complaint. We give you the opportunity to tell you about it. We then contact the other person. We say, are you interested in coming together in a mediation? Then we schedule a first, what we call intake meeting. And that each party then, if they've agreed to mediate, comes in and gets to tell their story. They get to tell their side. What's happening for me? It's an opportunity. Oftentimes when people are in conflict, they're so highly emotional. They're thinking in that, what's it called, the amygdala part of the brain, where fight or flight. And so our process really helps to kind of calm folks down and get more, shifting people into being able to think more rationally. We really help people try to understand what the real issues are, sort of the root causes, because oftentimes you have a position like, I don't know why my neighbors, won't control that dog coming into my yard, and that's the position, but then what's going on underneath that is what we try to help people understand. Then at the end of that meeting, then we also coach the folks that we're working with to say, okay, so when you're going to get ready to tell your side, what's important to you, how can you share that information in a way that the other person will be able to hear it? And then also, how are you going to think about hearing and being receptive to hearing what the other party is that you're speaking to? And then we talk about ways to be sort of more effective in communication, so sort of helping people go into that mediation being more open. Because at a certain point in mediation, for it to work, you have to be able to open to hearing what everyone else is saying so that you can understand more deeply, and then that's when you can begin to figure out those solutions. So in our eviction court mediation, that process is different. We would prefer that it not be the way it is. So we really, our goal, Tanda and mine and the attorneys, the HEP project's goal is to get to people upstream before they're in that situation, because there isn't the time. We can't do individual interviews. We're in a breakout room. Oftentimes the landlords have an attorney. The tenant does not. Part of the role of a mediator is to try to level the power dynamics in that, which is often very difficult. And then the role of the mediator is to ensure that the agreement that the landlord and tenant are, if they're able to come up to an agreement, is going to work for all parties, because we don't want tenants to agree to something that they're not going to be able to follow up with. So, so we do our best, and I think that, we are seeing more remain in tenancies. Thanks so much. I don't know if any of the IERA people yes, thanks to the help of getting more rental resources to tenants, and so we're seeing an uptick on that a little bit. It's not great, and then we still are able to oftentimes successfully negotiate, as Tanda called, a move-out agreement. So I'll stop there. Any questions? Yeah.
You speak to the idea of making this mandatory. Apparently the tenants haven't liked some kind of mandatory out-of-court system first before they enter.
Yeah, that's a great. I would love. Well, so in many other states, this kind of a process is put in as a precursor to actually showing up in the hearing, so that you can schedule them ahead of time, and then maybe landlords and attorneys, attorneys are expensive, and so they're willing to and landlords are willing to negotiate, but it has to be pretty limited. But then we could have more time. I would love to try to do something like that here in the state of Indiana. That did not, and that comes at the state level. For something like that to happen will require really, I think, a strong statewide advocacy push with the Supreme Court. Our local judges tried to do something. I don't know. I'm not an attorney, but we tried to do something that was sort of, that would be right before and gave our local folks the ability, but people just weren't interested too much, and then the court system sort of said you can't do that. Indiana doesn't, so court system said no, you can't do that. Tanda?
I was just going to say, were you asking about the eviction diversion program? Because we did have that for a short time in Monroe County. Yeah, it's when in the court hearings, the judges will talk about the landlord-tenant program, the statewide landlord-tenant program. They're always asking any of the plaintiff's attorneys if they are interested in participating in eviction diversion. Not yet has one plaintiff's attorney wanted to participate. So out of all of the hearings that we've had so far, there have been, that have come into court, there have been 3 that have decided to go into that landlord-tenant, the eviction diversion program, and those were all pro se landlords. And so I think hopefully that provides information to answer your question.
Yeah.
We were pushing for it, we were trying, the Judge Stafford was working with other people to put that into, and then Indiana clerk and administration said you can't do that, and so we're stepping bounds. I think they were looking at it. I think that had been shortly after the CDC declaration process was also shut down. I think they were worried about something like that happening at the state level.
But other states do have it as a mandatory first step, and then if it fails, then you go to the next step. So, any other questions? Yeah.
I don't know how much time you have, but I do have one quickly for you. I'm curious to see to know about the changes you've seen over the last couple of years in landlord-tenant mediations, because it seems to me as the cost of first-time home ownership has increased, that's created a greater demand for rental property without a greater supply, and so therefore the landlords are less likely to be patient with their current tenants because they think there's another one waiting in line. I have a long waiting list. So have you noticed changes in the last few years?
That may be playing into place, but or that may be happening a little bit. But in general, the 2 things in terms of trends, I think the attorneys over the last couple of years at first didn't like this process. It was like, what? Why are these people here? They're just getting in the way of, what's happening. And so now I do think the attorneys are more willing to enter into mediation. They're willing to enter even to an early mediation if we get a hold of someone fast enough. I think in general, many of the attorneys in our community really do want to find a way to work with folks, but I think you're right, that issue that they know that they can fill their property really quickly is probably moving them to be maybe, but I don't know that we know that, and we haven't looked at the data, but I'm sure that does play into it. Anyone else? Thanks.
Thank you, Liz, and Tanda as well. As I mentioned, Bloomington has a robust nonprofit service network, and we're grateful for the services CJAM and HEP provide, and certainly have big partnerships with those programs. Next, I'm glad to bring up, let me just say regarding questions, if you are not able to ask your question today, or you're listening at home and have a question about housing, please email or call the HAND department. Our email address is hand, HAND, at bloomington.in.gov, and you can call 812-349-3401 if you have a question about housing, so in case you're not able to do that today. So next up, we're grateful to have the Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority, which is a state agency, and you've heard a little bit today about the Indiana Emergency Rental Assistance Program. And so Mindy Goodpaster from IHCDA, as the acronym is going to come up and give a presentation about rental assistance and what's been happening there for the last couple of years and what's going to be happening moving forward. So, Mindy?
There's a clicker, forward, backwards.
Oh, good, and I can see it up there, okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Mindy Goodpaster, and I am the Community Outreach Manager for the Indiana Emergency Rental Assistance Program. So I'm really happy to be here to talk to you today, and hopefully it's going to be a brief presentation. I realized just sitting here and listening to some of the questions and things that there's so much more that I could cover too, so if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them as well. But today we just want to give you sort of the overview of what is the program, who is eligible, how do you apply, and what can you expect to receive if you are eligible for the program. So what is IERA? So IERA is the Indiana Emergency Rental Assistance Program. This is what we call the balance of the state program. So initially when the funding rolled out as a result of 2 different acts by Congress, we received money as a state, and then there were also 6 other programs that were running in the state in different counties. 4 of those have closed, and so now there are a few other remaining ones in addition to us. So we now have, Marion County has its own program, which is Indy Rent. Hamilton County has its own program, and the city of Fort Wayne. But the city of Fort Wayne, we think, is going to be closing their program. And so what has happened to all of the programs that have closed, they are now eligible for the Indiana Emergency Rental Assistance Program. And so we are separate and distinct, which is hard for some folks to realize, but we do have different criteria beyond what Congress has said that we need to have for eligibility. But we also, with the state program, we can offer up to 18 months of assistance, whereas some of the other programs can't. So we provide assistance for rent and for utilities, and again, that's for up to 18 months total. When we first started in March of 2021, we were only doing 12 months of assistance, and then that went up to 15 months and now 18 months, and that's the maximum amount that we can allow. So that is assistance for both past due rent or utility arrearages and forward-facing rent too. So, so a person can have a rental arrearage that we can pay all in one lump sum, and then if they're still having a hard time paying forward-facing rent, we can pay that in 3-month increments until they hit their 18-month maximum. One of the other things that we can do is we can pay for not just utilities in terms of the traditional electric, water and sewer and that sort of thing, but we can also pay bulk home energy, so fuel oil, wood, coal pellets, those types of things. So, so it's a pretty well-rounded program. And the amount of assistance for rent that we can offer, unfortunately, is capped, and this is based on how many bedrooms in the unit. But you'll see that it's a pretty fair comparison for the entire state. We had to make something that would qualify for the whole state. So, so there is an allowable monthly rent, and then the maximum that a person can receive or a household can receive for the 18-month maximum. And then utility amounts are determined as well by the number of bedrooms. In terms of the eligibility, we have 3 criteria that Congress set that every household that applies has to meet in order to qualify for the assistance. So the first is the pandemic impact. So there has to have been some sort of financial hardship experienced during the pandemic that has caused them to become having a hard time paying for rent. And so, you know, at some sort of risk of having their utilities shut off, at some sort of risk for losing their housing. And it can be anything from, you know, I'm sure we all know somebody who lost their job or were furloughed from their job because of the pandemic, someone who lost wages, who had to stay home and quarantine and lost wages, who had children like my children, who had to stay home because their schools closed. those are all examples of ways that you could have been financially impacted during the pandemic. And that goes back to April 1st of 2020. That's the date that we're looking at. So anytime within this 2-year period is when the financial impact has had to happen. Housing instability, we qualify that in a couple of different ways. It could be something extreme as someone is being evicted because of failure to pay rent. They are so far behind that their landlord has filed an eviction on them. Or it could be something where every month you're having to choose between paying your rent and paying a utility, paying your rent and paying for gas money and groceries. That's housing cost burdened. And so if you are paying more than 30% of your income for housing related costs, then you are housing cost burdened and you could qualify for this program. Both of those issues as well are what we call via attestation. So that means that you just have to say that, yes, one of these situations applies to me, and we don't require any documentation. You don't have to prove it to us, but you do have to be honest and say that this situation does apply to you. But the third criteria is the income qualification, and that one we actually do have to verify that you meet the income qualification. So you will see here on the chart that you have to be what we call 80% low income limited or 80% below the area median income. And those qualifications are up there. So for a 3-person household, you can't earn more or have more income than $52,800. So that's where our limits are. Those limits are changing. And so, and I don't have what the numbers are changing to, but if you applied before and you were over the income limit, you might want to check again and reapply because you might fit in within the new limits, and those will be posted on our website soon. The other way to determine income is through categorical eligibility for income, which that means is if you qualify for one of the programs that is listed, so SNAP, if you receive supplemental nutrition assistance benefits, if you are on HIP, if you receive TANF, the temporary assistance for needy families, any of these programs will automatically qualify you for the income level for the program. So all you have to do is you have to show us documentation that says that you are receiving one of these benefits. So that can be your benefit letter, that can be, there's the app for SNAP. You can show us online that you have your documentation. If you have a HIP card for insurance, you can show all of those things to us and you will automatically apply, or you will automatically qualify for the assistance in your application. A few things that we can't do, unfortunately, we can't help homeowners. So this program is only for renters who have a written lease. And if you are a homeowner and you have an arrearage in your mortgage payments, if you're having a hard time paying your mortgage, I put the website up there, 877gethope.org. That is the Homeowner Assistance Fund, which is also run through IHCDA. We can help you. If you go on the website there, you can get more information about that and find out how to apply and if you qualify. We currently cannot assist folks who are homeless, and I know that this is sometimes problematic because a lot of these folks really, really need assistance. There has to be a written lease. So if you know someone who is currently homeless, maybe they're staying in a hotel, if you can help them get a lease for an apartment, they can then apply for assistance because they have the written lease in place. And if they're having a hard time and they're not going to be able to, pay until they can get back on their feet, they can apply for assistance. So we can help in that regard. And then finally, some of the funding, some of the things that we can't pay for would be the disconnect and reconnect fees for utilities. We can pay reasonable late fees, however, and that goes for rent too, because some landlords do charge late fees. If there are arrearages, so we can pay for those. We cannot pay for security deposits, first month's rent, pent deposits, or fees. We can't pay for any updates or improvements or repairs to the rental unit. And any utilities that are part of the lease, if they are sub-invoiced to the tenant, we can pay those, but those will fall under the amount that we are paying for the rent payment. Okay? So how to apply, and I know this slide is pretty small, but we have two ways to apply. The first way and the primary way is through our website, indianahousingnow.org. And what you do when you go on that website, and this is a picture of the top part of the page, it's like a salmon-colored top part of the page. You click here to apply, and you'll go in and you'll create an account with an email address. So we always say have a valid email address that you can check regularly, because that's how we're going to communicate with you in the application. And this is something that you can have access to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it's your account, and this is where you will answer all of the questions on the application, you will submit all of your documents, and you will communicate with us about where your application is and what type of assistance you're going to receive. The application is also available in English and Spanish, so that hopefully is more helpful to some folks. Additionally, you can also call Indiana 211 to do your application, and we have operators who are on staff Monday through Friday, 8 to 6, and they're trained to help folks with the application. Now, the qualification that I have to make with that process is that if you call 211, they can help you with the questions. They can even help you get an email address if you don't have an email address. You will have to still create an online account for the submission of your documents. We cannot accept documents any other way except through the online portal, so you will need that. And what we do say, if you're a service provider in the community, we know that technology can be a barrier to folks. And so if there is a technology barrier, or if someone does not know how to read or write, we have had that situation as well. Please help them, give them access to technology, give them access to Wi-Fi. If you have a laptop you can spare in your office, please help folks apply. We understand that there can be a burden, and unfortunately we had to create a streamlined system, and this was the best way to do it. So we're trying to work around and trying to help folks who might have some challenges. So please, and feel free to speak to me afterward if you want to about how we can help you get tenants to apply, because we do go around as staff and do application events where we come with our laptops and we're ready and we get everything submitted. The application, just because some folks have some questions about it, so I broke it out into two parts. So the first part of the application is where we ask all of the questions, right? So we want to know how many bedrooms do you have, how much income do you earn, and we do ask for the income for all folks over 18 years old in the home. Like, we have to do the cumulative income, not just the person who is applying. And we ask for your contact information. We want to know how many kids are in the unit. We will need the birth dates for everyone who is listed as an adult in the household. We don't ask for any information about the children. And most importantly, we ask for the landlord contact information. We have a vendor portal and a vendor database that landlords use to create their accounts, because we also need things from landlords when tenants apply. So in order for us to do the best job we can to match folks, we ask that folks who are applying know their landlord's name, because when you go in and you click that button to enter the landlord's name, it's going to pre-populate, or it's going to come up with your landlord. So if your landlord is Tom Smith and you start to type in Tom, then you're going to see a drop down of all of the Toms that we have in the state. And so you have to make sure you're clicking the correct one, because we've had cases where folks have clicked on the wrong one and then gotten connected to the wrong landlord. And that just makes things a little bit stickier for us in terms of the length of time it takes us to figure out who is your correct landlord. So if you're helping folks apply, or if you're a landlord, please make sure that your tenants know exactly who their landlord is and how their account is listed in the online portal. And we also do ask there too, if you have utility assistance that you need, that tell us what it is, and then you'll prove how much you owe through submission of a bill. And then finally, we do ask some demographic information. This is only for the U.S. Department of Treasury, not for the application. Treasury wants us to report back to them the demographics of folks who are applying. It has nothing to do with the application. It doesn't go into the file for your application. We simply are reporting that data to Treasury. And a person who is applying can decline to answer any of those questions, and it's fine. It has no bearing on the application whatsoever. The second part of the application is where we ask to submit the documentation. So we will need a copy of the current lease and lease addendum. If you're receiving any unemployment, we will ask that question. If you're not, that's fine too. You can just say no. We will ask for government-issued ID for every adult who is listed on the lease. We will have to have that. So that can be a driver's license, that can be a passport, it can be a passport from the United States or another country. We can take any type of photo ID that is issued by the government, wherever you may be from. It's essentially, we have to be able to verify you are who you say you are. And then finally, if you do receive any of those programs, any of those benefits, this is where you can upload that information as well. And then any of your recent utility bills that can show us exactly how much you are in arrears for your utilities, okay? And that's what we have. And we also, to make things a little bit simpler, you can scan the documents, you can send us a PDF, you can send us a Word document, Excel document, you can send us a JPEG, you can take a picture with your phone. As long as we can read the document, we'll take it in whatever format is easiest for you to upload. So a lot of times what I do when I'm helping folks apply is I take a picture with my phone, and then I change it into a PDF or a JPEG and upload it directly into the file, and that works really well. So that is an option as well. Just a quick recap or a quick summary of how much assistance we have given out so far. These numbers are current as of this week, and I put the website. You can find our weekly updates on our website. So for Monroe County, we have assisted 857 households so far. We have given out just over $5 million in assistance for rent, and then $394,000 for utilities. And then that number at the end, the total assistance paid and obligated. So because this is an 18-month benefit that is for the folks who are eligible, if a person applies and they're accepted and they don't use all 18 months right away, we set aside a full 18 months of money for each household who is accepted into the program. So they can choose to use it or not, but that money is there for them to use until they exhaust the funds. So that's what is obligated within the funds. And so you can see we've got, for Monroe County, we've got just over $9 million paid and obligated to folks. So in terms of the full state, we've got almost 25,000 households served. You think that, that's a pretty good number. I mean, we know we have a lot more who are needy, and so that's why we're trying to get out there and promote the program. But, that's not a bad number given that we had to start this whole program from scratch just over a year ago. So we are working really hard to get this money out to folks who need it. If you want more information, we've got a couple of different websites that you can visit, and you can obviously apply at indianahousingnow.org, but please, if you want to know more, we've got fact sheets available, we've got all sorts of information for folks, for tenants and for landlords and anyone else, to feel free to download, share it, put it on your website, put it on your social media. That would be fantastic, and we would appreciate the help. And if you have questions, we do have our general customer service numbers. We have a phone number and an email, iera@ihcda.in.gov. That's how you can get more information. Or I am happy to take some questions right now. Yes?
So the first question is, so if you're on those benefits, for example, Medicaid, you're automatically eligible?
You are automatically eligible for the income eligibility. And then as long as you have some sort of financial impact because of the pandemic and because you're at risk of losing your housing, then yes, those three criteria all have to be met.
Next question was, let's just say, for example, someone moves, just like a scenario, someone moves into an apartment their first month, they pay their deposit, they do their first month rent. Are they able to apply for the program if they're needing help, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they can if they apply after newly moving in, if they're having a hard time paying the rent, absolutely. Yes.
You mentioned needing some information from the landlords. If they don't cooperate, provide that information, is there a system set up where tenants can proceed on their own at some point?
There is. So we can provide assistance even if landlords choose not to accept assistance on their tenant's behalf. So what we do in that case is we do make our best attempt to reach out to the landlord. In the portal that they create, they have the ability for each tenant who applies to say yes or no. They will accept the assistance, and if they do not, then we can do a dual payee check, which means that we write out a check for the tenant and the landlord, and we send that to the tenant. The tenant signs it and then hands it over to the landlord to sign, just as if it were a personal check. We do also have instances where landlords who refuse to take that check as well, and if they do, we can't help that household. We can't force landlords to participate or take the money. That is their choice. So unfortunately, then the money does not get to the tenant. Anyone else? Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mindy. And that number that Mindy displayed, the 857 households, that's been a steady uptick since we started working together last year, and IHCDA has been working really hard to get the word out, and so thank you for getting it. You've been either down here or with us virtually a number of times, Mindy, and your team, so thanks for all of that effort. Oh, got the clicker? Sure. All right, well, while we're talking about housing, there are sort of three main buckets the city of Bloomington likes to think about in terms of housing. It's rental housing, ownership, home ownership housing, and what do we do about folks who are housing insecure and who might also be unhoused? And so that is a community-wide effort, and in the last year and a half or so, a large group of folks have gotten together. I'm not going to steal your thunder, Mary, but there's been a huge community effort to tackle this issue, and so that has resulted in some funding by the city of Bloomington and by Monroe County to implement what is known as the Heading Home Initiative. And I'm going to bring up Mary Morgan, who is the director of housing security for this initiative. She's through a partnership of the Community Foundation of Bloomington, Monroe County, and United Way of Monroe County. So we're glad to have Mary with us and ask her to come up and share an update.
Thanks, John. I'm shorter than you. It's good to see some familiar faces here today. I'm happy to be here, and one of the things that's been most exciting is to learn from other agencies and a lot of work that's being done in this community. So I think that's fantastic. Thank you. So as John said, I'm Mary Morgan. I'm Director of Housing Security, and I'm leading the Heading Home of South Central Indiana initiative. We are housed at the United Way of Monroe County, but as John indicated, it is truly a community-wide initiative. Today I'm going to talk about kind of an overview of the program. We'll look at some of the main components, talk about the staff that's leading it, and then tell you how you can get involved yourself. So Heading Home is a strategic plan that really is comprehensive and designed to work with our community partners to end homelessness, or at least significantly decrease homelessness, improve affordable housing, and really identify effective strategies in this area. And when I say this area, we are Monroe County, but we're also looking regionally at other counties, Morgan, Greene, Lawrence, Owen, and really just trying to make sure that this is not focused only on Monroe County. The origins actually date back to 2014. The South Central Housing Network developed a plan called Heading Home. It was a comprehensive plan. It was a fantastic document, but there was no staff support and there were minimal resources for implementing that plan. So while it was a great plan, as you know, the implementation is really challenging if you're working with a lot of volunteers who have full-time jobs elsewhere. So it didn't really go anywhere in terms of implementation. Of course, work was being done in the intervening years. Agencies were working on some of these same issues that we're hoping to support. But it wasn't until 2021 when there was a sense in the community that we've really reached a crisis point in terms of homelessness and housing security. So the United Way of Monroe County, the Community Foundation of Bloomington and Monroe County, City of Bloomington, Monroe County, many other community partners came together to update that plan. It was a year-long process, broken into several different committees to do the work, over 100 stakeholders involved, and it really was looking at best practices, trying to map out the resources that are already available in the community, looking at where there are gaps and where we need to fill them. And it was an intense process that I was involved with before joining Heading Home. There was no Heading Home at the time. And from this work, a new plan was developed, which coincided with the availability of funding, and this is crucial. The American Rescue Act Plan Act, ARPA, was providing funds because of COVID-19 to communities in this area. So the City of Bloomington and Monroe County generously agreed to support the Heading Home initiative and the implementation of that. We had other community partners that pitched in as well, but really it was those two government entities that made a strong commitment to housing security and allowed this work to move forward. Most importantly, or perhaps most importantly, it allowed us to have staff that can implement the plan. I was hired in late 2021, really started in January of 2022, and we just recently hired Tatiana Peters as the Assistant Director of Housing Security to join this effort. I've mentioned some of these community partners, South Central Housing Network. They are comprised of many different agencies in this area and the surrounding counties. Meets every other month. Some of you might be involved in that. In addition to the partners that I've already mentioned, Community Foundation, Monroe County, and of Bloomington, Monroe County, the City of Bloomington, Bloomington Township, and many others. Members of these organizations represent our advisory group that meets monthly and gives guidance to the implementation. And then, this is what you already know if you're here, the impact of the housing market, and we're not unique. This is a national problem. Cost burden residents, over 50% of Monroe County households living in rental housing are spending more than 30% of their income on rent. That's kind of a staggering number. This population is most vulnerable to fall into homelessness. There is a lack of affordable units available for rent, and there are a whole host of problems related to that. Landlords are becoming increasingly unlikely to accept vouchers. We have a lot of work to do in that regard. And without intervention, a lot of people who are housing insecure will fall into homelessness. So the three broad goals of Heading Home are to make homelessness rare, brief, and non-repeating. Those are pretty straightforward goals. We are looking at many strategies within those categories, within those goals, to as we implement the plan. Going into it a little more deeply, to make homelessness rare, we're trying to increase housing stock for low-income households and people in extreme poverty, incentivizing landlords in different ways to prioritize low-income housing, expanding healthcare access, initiating practices to assist households in preventing homelessness. In the category of making homelessness brief, we're shifting from a housing readiness approach to a housing first approach, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with that, although the transition is hard. So the idea of housing first is that all of the other problems that you might be experiencing are exacerbated if you don't have housing. There are some folks that I respect who say that the solution to homelessness is a place to live, right? So the idea of Housing First is to move people into housing as quickly as possible, and not have, people in shelter trying to deal with their other problems. We're trying to provide a home and then move towards working on these other problems. Making homelessness brief includes increasing rehousing options for people who are most vulnerable, prioritizing ongoing case management for support of people who are impacted by homelessness, using transitional housing strategically, and that often is for survivors of domestic violence, people with substance abuse disorders, and unaccompanied youth. And then ensuring that we have effective, coordinated assessment tools for the entire continuum of housing. And then finally, to make it non-repeating, once you are out of homelessness, trying to enhance opportunities for employment for people who are either experiencing homelessness or at risk of that, and then expanding supports for people who are recently homeless to help them deal with substance abuse disorders or mental health issues. Here's some of our current projects. We're very new, less than 6 months old, but we've made headways in many ways. The cross-agency training we're really excited about. One of the things we're doing is looking at what kind of training multiple agencies need, whether it's case management or street outreach, and then we as Heading Home would be able to provide that training, fund that training, so that agency case managers or the street outreach crews will be able to take advantage of that at no cost to the agencies. We're providing support, logistical support for the South Central Housing Network. We're developing a housing resource guide that can be a public resource for anyone who's a case manager or anybody who is in need of themselves getting access to resources for housing. That's in the works. We're going to be rolling out a website and communication tools, including a regular newsletter and convenings. And then perhaps most exciting, we are joining the Built for Xero national program. And I just want to talk a little bit about that. Built for Xero is part of an organization called Community Solutions. They are working really internationally to help communities decrease homelessness. The goal is to reach something called functional zero. There's a formula involved, but basically it means, depending on your population, getting as close to zero as you possibly can. Sorry, the slide is a little janky. We're working with multiple counties on this initiative. I've said this before, it is a regional approach. Built for Xero is fantastic in providing different kinds of supports for communities that are doing this. And I should add that we're partly excited because we're the first community in Indiana to join the Built for Xero network. One of the first things they're going to help us do is to clean up data so that we actually know. We have a database that we can be confident of is tracking and moving as we move people out of homelessness and providing the kind of support they need. That's something we're going to be working on initially. A core group of us just last week went to a conference in Chicago with Built for Xero communities. There were over 500 people there from Maine to California, Texas, Minnesota, even some international communities from France and Australia. So it was really exciting to be in a room full of people who are all passionate about this mission and who are working towards reaching functional zero in our communities. We feel like that membership is going to allow us to learn from other communities in addition to getting support from Built for Xero staff. And then finally, just the staff, again, that are working on this initiative, me, and I am joined recently by Tatiana Peters. There's our contact information. I hope you reach out to us. We have more information online. Right now, as I said, we're housed at United Way. So if you go to monroeunitedway.org/housing, you can read the plan, you can get more contact information, you can sign up for our newsletters when we start rolling them out. And I'm happy to take any questions, but I think we're running behind time, so I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks.
That's it? Oh, clicker, yeah. Keeps traveling. Thanks, Mary, and it's a great program that's going on with Heading Home. So among the many services the City of Bloomington provides, and we ask things of our residents, and we're able to provide various services from the local government to our residents. Our Public Works Department is here today, and Michael Large, the Special Projects and Operations Manager, is here to share a few words with us, give us an update on the Public Works end. So, Michael?
John, thank you. As he was saying, Michael Large, Operations Manager for the City of Bloomington's Public Works. I'm going to catch us up on the time because I'm going to be really brief here. My goal here today is to give everyone a background on exactly what we're doing with recycling in the City of Bloomington. I know that since China closed its borders to recycling in 2018, this is a conversation that a lot of us have been having in Bloomington. If you've been here for a while, you know we've gone from a time where we sorted everything and put it in its separate bins along the curbside to now having a single stream recycling. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. Just a quick background. In 2017, Bloomington transitioned into this modernization of recycling materials. As long as it's a clean material that is not separated and placed inside of its bin, it goes to the transfer station with the rest of the solid waste. It is then transferred to a MRF, which is a material recycling facility in Indianapolis. And at that time, the materials are there recycled into their various places. And the main thing about this is that it's about efficiency. It's a way to ensure that the materials are being utilized and repurposed rather than just palletized and put aside to collect dust. We have been really strong behind this whole initiative, and it's something that I believe that a lot of the community members can get behind. Just wanted to reiterate that this is a big problem for America because municipalities across the country have stopped doing this altogether because of the inability to alleviate themselves of the recyclables once collected. Just for some data real quick, that's what I do, John. I'm a nerd, so I'd like to talk data. In 2021, we created 8,260 tons of solid waste in the City of Bloomington. That's about 16.5 million pounds of trash. The numbers say that about 75% of that material is actually recyclable, but in fact, we only collected 3,679 tons of recyclables, so right at 7 million pounds. So with that saying, we have a long way to go, but we are getting there, and that's why I'm here today to promote this new application that myself, as well as some of my staff in the Public Works Administration Office have brought online. I wanted to get the QR code up there so everyone can snap their pictures and it can be, live and rewound and played again and again. It's called Recollect. Recollect is a new partnership that we have formed that is an educational software that not only allows you to search the individual materials to know whether or not they're recyclable, but it will also allow you to view your waste collection schedule. In addition to, it will allow you to schedule the pickup of large items. So as the tenants move in and out throughout the years, we have this large transient population. They're able to utilize this website and a technology that is mobile and very easily user-friendly. So that is what I have for everyone today. If you have any questions, I am free to answer now or afterwards. And then my card is also on the Public Works table. So I appreciate the time and opportunity.
Thank you, Michael, and thanks to our Public Works Department and all of our city staff who sort of help advance the cause of our residents here in Bloomington. I want to thank our colleagues all the time when we're here, both here at the city and the county and the townships and all the local government entities here in Monroe County. So to round us out on our speakers today, we have Stacy Williams. So we talked about a lot of resources that are available, some from the city, some from others, but there's a very important legal resource with Indiana University. A lot of times, you know, as Joe mentioned and we talked about, there's only so many things the local government can do to help residents. What if you have a legal challenge? What do you do? And one of those really important resources is IU Student Legal Services. And so Stacy Williams is going to come up and talk to us about that to finish us off this morning. So Stacy.
Thank you, John. Hi, everybody. I know we're running behind. I'll go real quick. I am Stacy Williams. I'm the Director of Student Legal Services. I'm also one of the attorneys in our office. Student Legal Services is a law office on campus for students. I have some basic information about our program in these slides. We are, let me make sure I can manage this. We're a fee-funded program, which means we get some of the student fees that some folks have been hearing about. It's been kind of a controversial topic, so I always like to throw out the figure that we get actually $9.26 from each student each semester, so it's a great deal. And for that, they pretty much get unlimited service as long as it's an issue that's within our practice areas that we can handle for them. There are 4 attorneys on staff. I'm one of them. It's myself and 3 staff attorneys. We have 3 full-time support staff. And another part of our mission, besides providing direct legal services to students, is that we're a clinical program for 2nd and 3rd year law students from the Maurer School of Law at IU. And so my job is a teaching as well as a practicing position, and our law students get to work with student clients and help them resolve those legal issues. We are a traditional legal practice. That's our primary mission. Individual representation and advice is at the core of the service we provide every year to thousands of students. We do outreach and educational programming as well. We do in-person presentations, webinars, educational materials, and we also have a bunch of substantive information on our website. We're always directing students there, not only to schedule an appointment, but also read up on what's in a lease. And we have, if you check it out at getlegal.indiana.edu, you'll see we have a lot of information on there on various topics. We offer virtual and in-person appointments, which is a shift we made with COVID, like so many folks did. And I want to bring up on the outreach and the educational presentations, one thing that's good to know, because a lot of folks in this community are focused on low-income tenants and people maybe who aren't here enrolled at Indiana University. That said, there are a lot of students out there in the community, and a lot of them who are struggling, maybe, you know, are kind of flying under the radar. And so what I like to encourage is sharing of information like this generally with other organizations, even if it's not directly student related, if you're not going to have an audience of students for any given event or presentation. I'm always happy to come out, or someone from my staff to come out and share information about our programming, because there may be student connections there that we're not aware of. Students have family members and others they're connected to who are struggling. And so just generally this network of information sharing, I think, is helpful, even if it's not a direct student issue. This is just a list of some of our practice areas, our primary ones. Landlord-tenant is our biggest area of civil practice. We go to court mostly in these cases. And then just generally, we're a general civil litigation firm. We do not represent in criminal matters. A lot of folks think that's why students need attorneys, and a lot of them do need attorneys for information when they get their drinking ticket. We give them that information, and generally they don't need to lawyer up for that any further than an advice appointment. So we're a department within the Division of Student Affairs, and this is another point I wanted to make about coming to us. When you go to a law firm, you know, caring lawyers are going to get the help that give them, the clients, the help that they need from a legal standpoint, and may refer them out to other services to give them support. That is a part of our mission as well. We're part of the Division of Student Affairs, connected with counseling and psychological services, student advocates, disability services for students. I talk to a lot of landlords every year who have tenants they don't know what to do with, and they know it's a student. And I will say, send them our way. landlords refer their tenants to us on a regular basis because they know that we're going to explain to this 19-year-old that it's a binding contract. And we're also going to talk to them about what other support they need and hopefully get them connected with other campus support, which is good for everyone concerned. So I guess that's all I needed to say today. Thanks for having me. This has been a great event, and I hope that we can continue to make these connections and share information. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Stacy, and Student Legal Services for all you guys do. That concludes our formal speaking program today. We invite all of you to go back out to our tables and get information. The goal, just to restate the goals for today, is to be a resource, as is in the name, for tenants or potential tenants or people who know potential tenants who might be having challenges or need some help with resources. So one of the things we like to do here at the city is to partner with agencies, a lot of whom are outside. If you're watching at home, just want to make sure you know you can visit our website, which is bloomington.in.gov/hand. Shoot us an email, hand@bloomington.in.gov, or call 812-349-3401, or reach out to any of the agencies you've heard from today. We are appreciative of everybody who came in person. We're appreciative of all those who are listening remotely, and wish all of you a good, happy rest of the Saturday. Hopefully the sun is shining right now, so I'll stop there and let you get outside. And our farmers market is still up and running for a little bit longer, I think, and we'll have our tables out here for another hour or so, I believe. So thanks again for coming, and I think if any partnering agencies wanted to come in and share any information, they're able to do so now, or they'll just talk to folks at tables. So thanks a lot for coming today.